Behold, my glorious supporter, True Mr.FOoT, has requested some discussion about asymmetrical communication. This is in reference to Twitch. I run my Twitch stream in a pretty different way from most other Twitch streams. We don't simply discuss a little more. We don't communicate, I comment a bit more. I'm a little more interactive. No. It is well and truly a different beast, where I talk to the audience, directly responding to chat messages, speaking nonstop for literally 3 hours. So if you haven't seen one of my streams before, you should know that as a premise going in. This is not just a stream where I talk a little more, and indeed there is some inequality. The entire show is us talking. And there is a lot of asymmetry there. We don't communicate in the same way. This parlay is about that. I'm going to read you what Mr.FOoT wrote. I'm going to provide kind of a completing detail. There's something in this description that I don't think anyone would think of if they were not me, but it is really important, so I'm going to add that. Then I'm going to present 3 solutions, one of which is something you can do, and 2 of which are things I can do, but I think it's mostly me. You can make an environment where things will go well, sure, but no matter what you say, if the environment isn't conducive to things going well, they won't go well. So ultimately, I've got to do the thing. And finally, I'll do a little bonus about why it's even worth running a thing this way. I don't think it's worth it for everyone, but there are a lot of benefits, and I'm going to talk about them. Let's get started with the facts. True Mr.FOoT says the interactions the streamer has with the audience, hereafter viewer, chat, or just I, are fundamentally asymmetrical. Now remember, it's Mr.FOoT saying stuff while this is here. The streamer will always decide the topic. You could just ignore every response you don't want to talk about. And by reading certain responses, you will always decide who to talk to. There's an important detail to add here later, but put a pin in it. That's one thing. You talk and we write. This is more important than it might seem. First of all, talking is way faster than writing, and the information density is a lot higher. The chat lacks pronunciation, tone of voice, and any gestures or facial expressions you could convey through your webcam. I also speak particularly quickly when I stream, and I get to use the game, where applicable, as a visual aid. Suffice it to say, I have a lot of advantages when communicating. This means that a response from you is pretty much instant, and the counter response could take a couple minutes to write, especially if it's a complex topic. These are the objective facts. I personally think that you do a pretty good job with the first one. Some amount of moderation is necessary, and you usually respond to everything that adds to the conversation. Now to the specific problem that is related to the second fact. Your stream has a pretty high standard of conversation. We expect well thought out responses from you, and you expect the same thing of our chat messages. But I would argue that you have an easier time giving a well thought out response than we do. There's a lot of subtlety that's conveyed through the gestures and tone of your responses. Correcting a mistake, expanding on your opinion, or rephrasing an argument is quick and easy for you. This subtlety and flexibility is missing from our chat messages. We, Mr.FOoT and I, have had a lot of misunderstanding in our Warframe discussions. What happens is that I try to give a quick, harsh response before the stream moves on to the next topic. You pick my response apart for its lack of nuance, and I respond with my full opinion that includes all of the nuance that I was implying in my original fast response. At that point, you realize that our opinions don't differ as much as we thought. Frankly, maximizing nuance to avoid this is exhausting for me, for Mr.FOoT. You could say, I expect a lot of my viewers, and I don't want you to be a part of the stream if you're unwilling to put some work in. That is a valid opinion, but it would lead me to taking part in less discussions. You could give your regulars the benefit of the doubt in terms of implied nuance, but treating your regulars differently from your other viewers has a whole bag of attached problems that I'm not going to get into. And neither am I. Let's get to the actual question. What's your take on the asymmetry? Is it a problem? Yes. And how do we go about improving this and the overall quality of the discussions we have on stream? Mr.FOoT took the time to add a little addendum at the end of this that clarifies that this isn't meant to be an attack or anything. Of course, I know that you put the effort into writing this long post and paid me $9 to make this video because you care about this, but I want to make sure the viewer knows that too. Mr.FOoT is not being unfair or overly critical. They're trying to be productive and dense and to the point, and I feel like you did a pretty good job with that. Cool. So there it is. That's the problem, if you will. To wit, this specific part about needing or feeling like you need to give a kind of oversimplified version of your opinion because the discussion is going to move kind of quickly and there's a lot of questions and a lot of people competing, sort of. which means that you have an incentive to kind of get in there. But that incentive causes you to sort of remove what you wanted to say, and also causes me to assume that you didn't mean to say it. Bad, right? So that's the thing that we want to not do. That's ideally, these solutions will eliminate the pressure to do this thing on you and me, and the need. There just won't be a reason to. That's what we need to do. We need to figure out why it happens, and we need to figure out how to make it a thing you don't feel like you need to do. That's the problem. But there is an additional complicating ripple here that I need to add in. So let's add it. I do want to quickly acknowledge, though, that when you say, I expect a lot of my viewers, I don't want you to be part of the stream if you're unwilling to put some work in, there is some nuance here between like totally oversimplifying and maximizing nuance, right? You don't want to feel like you have to totally oversimplify, but you also shouldn't have to feel like you need to legalese the thing you have to say so that it's airtight and the most nuance-rich phrase ever spoken in the human language. Like, that's ridiculous, of course. We want something in between. You are doing some work. Like, I don't want people to be part of my stream if they're not willing to put some work in, but the amount I'm asking for is less than this is. I don't want it to require this much. You see what I'm trying to say? And I reckon that most people who want to talk in a Twitch chat at all are probably willing to put in this amount of effort. I'm only asking people to act in good faith and think about what they're saying. But I did think that was worth clarifying. Okay, so now we need to add this little wrinkle. What's the additional problem, you're saying? Because if you look at the situation as it is now, it kind of looks like I just need to give you more of the benefit of the doubt. And when people say something like sort of stupid or whatever, I just need to ignore it, right? Simple as that. I need to promise you that I will, interpret you favorably or whatever, and ignore the people who say things that aren't relevant, right? And I have done something like this that is kind of the 0th or 4th solution for this discussion, where when people ask a question, I've found that it is much more effective for me to just interpret the question in every possible way, rather than asking what they mean. I simply assume they mean everything I can think of them possibly meaning, and then I answer all of those questions. And I have such an enormous advantage in communication. I can communicate so much faster than you, the viewer, that by the time you would have answered my question about what you meant, I could have just answered every question you could have meant. Better still, as a little bonus, there's a good chance that someone in the chat actually had a similar question, or one of the questions you didn't mean but I thought you might mean, which occasionally cuts down the number of answers that, require that question and answer thing, right? Isn't that good enough? Isn't that a solution? And with small amounts of viewers and a relatively focused topic, it is a good enough solution a lot of the time. I can just do that for any simply stated opinion, and anything that people elaborate on, I can discuss at length. And usually that allows the discussion with a small number of people to hum along at a nice little cadence, without anyone feeling like they're not getting what they were looking for. What's the problem? The problem is that when you say the streamer will always decide the topic and I can just ignore every response I don't want to talk about, I can ignore every response I want to talk about. And indeed, if the stream is an archive, I don't put the chat in. So the responses I ignore are not in that archive. But while the stream is being watched live, any random person who says something in the chat actually does affect the discussion quite a bit in a couple of different ways. And this is a problem because it means that if people insist on oversimplifying an opinion, I sort of lose control of the discussion a little bit. Again, I'll elaborate on the kind of 2 ways this can be an issue. The smaller one is that, you have influence in a community of people who focus on chat because the streamer focuses on chat. Even simply because I respond to something someone said, people just read the chat more. This means that if people are asking questions and people take the chat more seriously, you might ask a question, or some new viewer, this is how it usually happens, will ask a question, and a lurker or someone will chime in with an answer, usually kind of an incorrect, incomplete, or reductive answer. I either know it's just wrong, and so I want to correct it so the person doesn't have the wrong information, or it kind of goes against the spirit of my stream. And you might be thinking, well, you can still ignore that. But here's why I kind of can't, or there's a consequence to ignoring that. People associate my stream with what happens in my stream. If you get bad information or information that doesn't work for you or causes a problem, you will associate that advice from that other person, not me, as being advice from me, sort of. If you were asked, you probably know I didn't literally say that, although some people will edit their memory that way. But it's the same. It has the same impact as me giving you the bad advice. That means that anything that comes out of my stream is my platform. That's who I am on the internet, whether you like it or not. This is a responsibility that nobody signed up for. This is just what happens when you create a chat that is full of people discussing in earnest. People take what's said in chat more seriously. But people coming into the chat for the first time or just newly simply don't have a reason to know that. They wouldn't know that. It's kind of in the rules that we're a discussion focused stream, so I suppose people have to click on that, but most people don't read that, they click right through. And there's really nothing you can do about that. This means that in exchange for being discussion focused and having this wonderful community of people who want to give useful opinions to each other, we also give power to people who don't care about those things. And there isn't really a way to take it away other than me responding every single time people misuse that. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense. It matters. And it also matters in a way where people kind of start influencing the climate of the discussion. If people are shooting off quick answers, suddenly people do this thing on the internet where they're like, oh, we're going for facts. We're doing this trivia thing. And whenever somebody asks something, faster than I could possibly give a nuanced answer, somebody will give an oversimplified answer. And that gradually, if it happens a lot in a given stream session, removes the ability of the stream to be about discussions. Again, I can respond to these things and diffuse them, but I can't ban all of these people, and I often can't respond to all of these people. It's also, this is kind of the second issue here, not really possible to ask the audience to help with this. I can become a person who can try, as best they can, to level-headedly address every problem that comes along. But it is simply not practical to have a meaningfully large community of people that will do that. You might be thinking, well, Zandy, I can just ignore the people that are acting in bad faith, but it's usually not that clear. A lot of the time, the person just gives kind of an obnoxious opinion, or they sort of derail the discussion with their own personal experience. And it's hard for even perfectly smart people like all of you to parse apart like, oh, this is kind of just them getting hung up on their own thing. I think I'm quite good at that because I hate it when people do that, and so I notice it more maybe. But I'm not perfect at it, and certainly a lot of other people are also not perfect at it. The point I'm trying to say is it's kind of hard to filter out, and people other than me filtering out is kind of imperfect. And it does have an effect on the climate of the stream and the way that my channel is perceived. If I completely neglected this, there would be no obvious consequence, but over the long term, I would do a lot less well, and our community would have less of a strong social contract that we're trying to have a meaningful discussion here. That is very important because it is why you can't simply solve this problem in the ways I described before. I hope that that makes sense. Now that I've kind of explained the entire issue, basically the sort of hidden, rather powerful influence that people get when they're in a stream that is focused on discussing, we can now try to solve the problem. What we're trying to solve, to elaborate one more time, is this idea that you kind of want to get your discussion point into the discussion without it leaving you behind, but then you want to oversimplify. And if you oversimplify, you're, whether you like it or not, using your influence to kind of do a thing to the stream chat or to me. And there's just nothing you can do about that. You would like to give your full opinion, and you would like to give your full opinion without worrying about making sure all the nuance is tight and everything. But if the discussion moves too quickly for you to do that, there really isn't any way for you to win. You either have to do harm by oversimplifying your opinion, or not state your opinion because it will get lost. The third solution is to state your entire opinion, and then it's just too late. This causes a problem where I have to go turn the discussion back to get back to you, even though I want to. That's hard. That is the problem. What are the solutions? Let's sit down. Okay, so there are three solutions that I'm going to talk to you about today. And the first one is something that kind of you can do. This one is sort of not a solution, but it's an extension of that additional problem, that influence thing. The first thing, and my takeaway, if there's something you want to do, is that most people watching my stream don't think of it as being that they have influence on the stream, the climate of the community, and me. But you do. You do have influence on that. And the solution number one is to know that. Sorry, it's not that exciting. Is to be aware that what you're saying has influence on that thing. There are a number of times when I see someone post something in the stream and that thing just has no effect other than to make people misunderstand. I understand why the person said it. It's usually because they're excited and they just want to take part in conversation, or they were speaking quickly and I'm speaking quickly and encouraging them to speak too quickly. I know why people do this, but it is useful to keep in mind and be aware that not only does it benefit you and everyone else in no way whatsoever, it just doesn't do anything other than harm. There is damage done there. And a lot of people sort of feel blindsided. I've seen this happen in my chat where they say something that has obviously, when you examine it this way, has no effect other than misunderstanding, but they were just trying to discuss, like, what's the big deal, you know? Fair enough. Totally fair enough. I'm not trying to tell you to be responsible for the entire stream that you do not run. I just think it is a solution merely to make the audience aware that that is a thing that happens, so that when confusion arises, people kind of know. Now, I've noticed one thing I really love about my Twitch audience is that you all kind of do know this in a sort of incomplete way sometimes. There is a lot of amazing emergent kind of understanding now that this has happened enough, where you all sort of are noticing, oh, this is where the misunderstanding came. Let's just get rid of that. Let's back up or something. I see people do that from time to time, which is fantastic. I think it's easier for me to know this because I see the results. Like the harm is really only visible to me. But yeah, there is a kind of a problem that is solved just by people knowing that they have this level of influence. And this is a little bit more critical. But there is also an element of considering why you might want to express the thing. Sometimes people say things on Twitch just to get attention. And I don't think most of my core audience does that because I don't really fulfill it very much. I generally ignore people that are attention seeking. I will stream Genshin Impact, for example, a game with rolls where you could get really lucky. And when people say they got an awesome thing on a roll and they're excited about like the luck of the roll, I ignore them because I need to ignore them, or the stream is going to be about that thing piece by piece. The more that's acknowledged, the more it will attract people who do that. The less people who are lurking and don't know what the stream is about will err on the side of expressing those things because they're rewarded. So there is a problem there. There is a thing where I get backed into a corner if too many people who are aware that this influences me still focus on that thing. There is an indulgency and a desire to have the streamer you like do all the things you're interested in. And I need to implore you to not do that. I am not good for everything you like. I have a thing I'm good at, and you don't want me to do things that are not that thing. Even if I would be good at them, even if you would enjoy it, it still does some harm. You should think of it as losing the thing that you like about me in exchange for some new thing that I'll do fine, but it's not that other thing. I hope you can understand why that's an issue. Again, I don't think this comes up that much. I think the people watching this video, there isn't very many times when you can do something about this. And I do not mind you asking about the thing. In fact, asking whether I'd be interested in doing something that you suspect I might not want to do actually helps because it gives me an opportunity to explain why not, which helps people who did not watch this video understand in an organic way. So don't do it artificially, but if there's something you're not sure about that you feel like is in my camp, but you're not sure and you are worried about this thing because you listen to me and you're a nice person, go ahead and ask. It's okay. That actually helps. To summarize, there is a solution here that is just about the viewer being aware of what's going on. Merely watching the video to this point basically completes this solution. That's all that can really be done. And talking about this on streams more in a more targeted, structured way, now that I've talked about it here, will help. That already does a lot of good. So thank you for listening to this first 20 minutes. Let's get to the things that I can do. We have the problem as it stands. You, the well-meaning audience member, can take a lot of responsibility for the effect you have on the stream, sure, but that doesn't really address the new people coming into the stream that are, after all, the only way this can be a sustainable business, because no matter how many regulars you have, they won't be regulars forever. Well, okay, you can make like infinite money, but you get the point. We have to have a solution that is systemic. We can't just make the current climate better. We need to do something that solves the root of the problem. That doesn't mean that there isn't anything you all can do, as we just discussed. But I think that the more fundamental solutions are the following two. To go back to the problem as it stood, if you need to oversimplify your opinion to join in a discussion because it's moving too fast, but a community like mine is essentially forced to assume that your opinion that is oversimplified is your entire opinion, because people do express their opinions that way, and because whether that's your full opinion or not, it has the effect of being your oversimplified full opinion, as we talked about before. If that's the situation, but you do want to discuss, I need to slow down the discussion. The solution is to make it so you don't have to oversimplify your opinion to get into the discussion. Is this possible? It's very possible. Solution 2 is to focus the streams, to make it so the stream is more focused. Slowing down discussion is weird. I said it that way to explain the problem, the solution, in a compact way, but you wouldn't want the medium-sized discussion topics that we usually discuss on streams to be slow, because they would be more boring, like there wouldn't be as much in there. The way to make it so viewers don't have to catch up to a discussion point is to make it change less often, to make it not change at all sometimes, to make streams that have a topic stuck to them. Now, for some kinds of games, this is automatic or easier than for other kinds of games. For example, when we stream Hades, Hades is a game where you do a run and you make a build as you go. So it's fairly easy, and indeed I don't think this is much of a problem in Hades, to just talk about the build as we go through the run. And oftentimes, because there are only little updates here and there, we have some other discussion topic that goes along just fine, and they can coexist. Hades does maybe solve that problem a little bit by being a game where there is inherently a topic of focus, the run happening at the moment. There's sort of something being built ongoing. This kind of prompt for a build option is something that I'm going to be coming back to in the future, but I think that it's too big a topic for right now. I just wanted to mention it because it is relevant. On the flip side, Warframe is an example of a game that uniquely makes this even more of a problem than it would otherwise be. I've talked to another viewer who feels that the Warframe streams are worse or less targeted because they've gotten larger. And I think that's only a correlation. Warframe is a game that has a lot of ugly loose ends, a lot of things in it that aren't there on purpose or aren't there with intention. Like the developers know they're there and put them there on purpose, but not for a good reason or for a long-term good reason, or they know that it's not a good reason, but they don't have time to do something about it right now. Warframe is silly with these problems. And what happens when you have that is that players in that community have an unusually large number of medium-sized confusions that if you're going to not ignore, you're going to have to address at considerable length, because it isn't as much as just explaining a quick fact about the game. That just isn't a common question in Warframe, because there are more fundamental confusions. This is a problem with Warframe, but I do think that there's a way around it. Solution 3 will kind of address this, but for Solution 2 with focusing, I think it's very possible to simply do Warframe streams that have a stated topic. Like, I was suggesting doing something like my framework series, my individual Warframe loadout or build videos for each Warframe, as a stream show, as something where every week when I stream Warframe, this is the Revenant Day, this is the Gara Day, this is the Hydroid Day, whatever. That may, if I can do it well, mostly solve the problem. Because it creates a topic to focus around that helps the discussion come back to center and assures you, the viewer, that if you are talking about what we are talking about, we are going to come back to what you had to say. You don't have to rush. And again, like that, the title alone isn't enough. But if the discussion can be like that, that's what I mean by like, if I can do it well, you should be reassured sufficiently that we will get to the point you want discussed. Furthermore, those Warframe streams will become archives every time, so you'll be assured that they'll have timestamps as well, and you can go find, whichever chunk you would like. I might even be able, we'll see, we'll try, to timestamp individual answers to questions, meaning that you could just ask something anywhere in a stream and then leave because you don't have time or whatever. And then it just will be in the video, and you can go click on a timestamp in the description and jump right to it. I can't promise you that will actually work, but I was working on a kind of similar system that I don't have anywhere near enough time or money for to develop, where there would be a bot in chat that would kind of field questions and put them in a list, and then, privately message you when I was going to answer your question. In other words, you would ask a question in chat, the bot would parse that using deep learning and tell me a question was asked, simultaneously messaging you that your question has been recorded. I would have a queue of questions, and then I would click each one as I answered them. Once I click the one right before yours, the bot will message you again privately on Twitch or whatever, maybe on Discord, and say, hey, he's about to answer your question now. And then even if you wait like a half hour and you just aren't caught up on where chat is, you know that your answer is coming. That is cool, but takes development time, human resources, and money that I don't have. So in the meanwhile, I think it is possible to do something kind of similar by simply focusing, structuring the streams a bit more when it's a game that doesn't already do that. Furthermore, it might simply be worth streaming more of games that do that, and avoiding games like Warframe that are so focused on things about them that are incomplete. Genshin Impact is a really good example, the third game I primarily stream, of a game that doesn't automatically structure a build to talk about the way Hades does, but is still much easier to discuss simply because there isn't as much fat on the game's build systems. Genshin Impact has a lot of problems, but its builds are clean and relatively transparent, so it's just not as hard. It doesn't prompt as many medium-sized discussion questions. Now, you might be thinking at this point in the discussion, well, that sounds good. That sounds like something to be aware of. I didn't realize that it was kind of tied to individual games a little bit and could be remedied possibly by just structuring the stream differently. But it also kind of sounds like what you're saying could be solved by providing other resources. Yes, it could. Solution 3 is, I'm going to call, more foundational materials. A lot of these questions could be answered in a video that is just kind of there, and then when they come up, you could just post the video. Now, obviously, for topics like Warframe, there are just too many things. It's just not possible to answer the hundreds and hundreds of large confusions that Warframe presents. That's just not possible. You could spend half a decade. I could have spent all of the past half decade that I've been making Warframe videos doing only that, and I would not be done. I did spend a good amount of that time doing that, and there's still more. There's always more. Warframe is, in this way, fatally flawed. It's never not going to be that way. It's always going to be a confusing mess because of the developer's strategy, unless it gets bought by someone else or collapses and gets on a private server. There's lots of good things about Warframe, and I think that by structuring a topic and having people go into it knowing we can't catch up with all that stuff, we can solve some of the difficulty. But there just isn't any curing that in the case of Warframe. I think for most other games, Warframe is exceptional in that way, and those other games won't have that problem in the same way. No, they have the problem much more the way Genshin Impact has the problem, where, for the most part, describing what we're doing in the game, even if you've never played it, is pretty straightforward. But there are a few, like we're talking one or two, medium-sized problems that you kind of do need to explain to welcome new people in. For Genshin Impact, for example, it's the gacha economy. If you're going to be interested in the game and then you interpret it as having this pay-to-win microtransaction, you need to have that explained to you if you are going to further be interested in the game. But that is a medium-sized topic. This is the thing that caused the difficulty before, where the discussion gets hung up on those topics, starts moving too quickly, and you can't explain your full opinion quickly enough to get it in before we're gone, right? It is possibly sufficient to simply make a video about only that topic and then link it when people ask about that topic. This isn't a complete solution yet, because there are games like Hades where like the premise of the gameplay loop is also kind of worthy of explanation, but I believe that in those cases you can make a very short video that kind of solves the problem. It's not easy to get anyone to do anything on the internet. What is so-called a call to action is a valuable thing. People won't just click on everything. People will not explore everything. If you have them on your side, and they will, then you have nothing to worry about, so none of this matters. But for the normal viewer, the person that is actually the problem in this situation, you can't just throw a video at them and be like, fine, whatever. But what might work is if the video was really, 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 really short, like a minute long, less than a minute long, literally a YouTube short. If you had somebody come into your chat and say, hey, I've watched you play Hades. This game looks cool. I hear you talking about builds, but what the hell is this game? And you tell them, hey, go watch this tutorial video. They would not be happy. But if you told them, okay, but this tutorial video is literally 1 minute long. You see what I'm saying? That might work. That for some people, they might be able to buy that. And I think for a lot of people, when they ask the medium-sized questions, many of them would be overjoyed to know that you made a video, you, the person they're enjoying talking to, made a video about the topic. So I don't think that the gotcha explanation video for Genshin Impact, I don't think that being like sort of long is really a problem. And if you can explain the premise of the game quickly, I think that might work. That might be good enough. So I do think there's an element here where these medium-sized topics that are just kind of impossible to avoid, or else you can't include people in the discussion, might be solvable by just making videos about them. You know, there are other ways that this could be helpful. By making examples of things, you don't need to backtrack as often to, you know, what do I mean about this character being able to do this thing? Or people ask about a thing you know is going to become a big topic of discussion, and then people just keep asking for that information to be repeated. Making it into a clip, the viewer, you could do that, and then sharing it does immediately solve that problem. And me making videos about things I know people will ask about frequently, like character builds in a game like Genshin Impact, is probably a pretty good solution. Finally, I simply think connected to this topic is to emphasize again that thing I said about Warframe. It is important going forward for me to simply pick games that do not have that many of these little things, or else it's just an uphill battle to get people to understand. After all, the goal of discussing at length is partially for people to actually understand the discussion, not just to think, oh, this is really interesting and how nice that it's intellectual and a meaningful discussion about this topic, but I don't understand. I'm not actually caught up to speed. We want to find a way to catch people up. And that does eliminate a lot of the sidetracking of medium-sized discussion topics. This is the solution that allows the second solution, focusing a stream. You can't focus a stream if there are things about the game that fundamentally unfocus the game every single time. Warframe is the best example of this. But there is a way to help address those problems by preparing ahead of time, by making more foundational materials, is what I'm calling it. I think that that is a relatively complete solution as much as there is one. I think that talking about things at length, seeking understanding, is difficult, period, in a society where people are encouraged not to do it. It's costly, it's expensive to have an opinion about a thing that isn't simple, that isn't overly simplified. That is just a large ask. So there is a cost here. It's not the best way to stream just because I have these elaborate solutions. I've thought about what I'm doing on Twitch more than most people have who stream on Twitch. That makes it sound really good. I'm here to tell you not to get biased too much by that. Just because I've thought about it more doesn't make it better. It has the merits it has. I just happen to have invested in it more. I value it more. The truth is, the main reason I do it this way is because I want it more personally. It's not a better business strategy per se. Let's begin this little bonus topic about why I even am running a stream this way. But I hope that you found the sort of solutions that I presented relatively useful. Being aware of the fact that you do have influence and an effect on the chat, and thinking about whether the thing that you're asking is a thing you want me to answer, or answer here. You can ask other places like Discord, Twitter, stuff like that, if you feel like it isn't something that you want to affect the discussion with, but it is something you want me to talk about. And if you're in doubt, to go ahead and ask. 2, to focus the streams more, to look at games that are inherently unfocused and make sure that there is some kind of focus, to try to have big topics and loose Q&A rather than medium and small size topics, because those are the topics that make it feel like it's hard to keep up with discussion. And 3, to create foundational materials that solve those medium and small topics, so that when they do come up, there's a way to solve them without constantly going back through over and over again and answering the same question. Occasionally, this might mean some fancy footwork where a topic needs to be explained very quickly, and that might be challenging, but if it can be achieved once, it's kind of solved forever. That's what I think would solve the problem. That's what I'm going to do. Thank you for asking. This really was helpful. A lot of these were things I sort of vaguely planned to do, but it did help solidify them that you asked this. That you did change a thing by asking this question. So thank you. Yeah, let's talk about this little bonus thing. The biggest problem I feel that creators like me have is the perception that there aren't different ways to run YouTube channels. When people think about something that you can do when you run a Twitch channel, a YouTube channel, a career online, mostly YouTube channels though, they think of them as being the same, and they're just things that are good for YouTube channels. For example, I've had many discussions with you all in the past about how asking people to like, comment, and subscribe has no cost, and it absolutely has a cost. For me, for a lot of people, they make videos or stream in a way where it doesn't have a cost, because the kinds of audiences they're attracting are so used to that being asked that it simply doesn't register as a meaningful statement of value to them. Very few people who watch those videos will think of them as being bad things, and those people probably won't watch that creator or will dislike that about them, but that simply doesn't matter to a creator that has that scale. To a person that is looking for discoverability, they want a lot of videos with a lot of watch time, with a lot of requests to like, comment, and subscribe, and the average works out. If they can get people to watch those videos, it does work. That strategy works very well. And to say that it has bad quality of life would be an exaggeration, because those people often simply get to play a game and then send the footage to an editor who then does it, gets paid, not for nothing. And then that gets put on YouTube and they make ad revenue from it that pays for the editor and their lifestyle. If you can get that to work, it's not so bad. The problem in my mind is that a lot of the time these audiences are not interested in what you're doing because of any nuance about the thing that's happening. If you change what you're doing, or you simply don't want to do it anymore, you do not have a very flexible platform to stand on. You were just kind of doing this general thing. And if it doesn't make people comfortable, for that is why they are watching it, because it is general and comfortable, then they're not going to watch it anymore. Furthermore, the YouTube algorithm has much more control over you than for creators like me, which I'll get to in a minute, because if it decides that your videos are not doing as well for whatever absurd reason, that is the only way that people are finding your videos. You're not appealing to them on a personal level, even if they think you are. They're not following you somewhere else. They're not talking to you as an individual and coming to an understanding of what's important to you and how you're going to do that. It's just not going to be as easy for those people to stick around. And they think of the thing you're doing as more of a casual, loose, general thing. So they don't think of it as a problem if you don't get as many YouTube views. This is not heartless of them. It just doesn't really register as being something that is as big a deal because you don't put as much effort into it. And there's nothing wrong with that strategy, but it's important to remember that it has advantages and disadvantages. This is kind of what I meant. Not registering that certain channels do have strategies, whether they seem like they do or not, whether the creator thinks of them as having a strategy or not, they do have a strategy, is a problem. And it's a problem because it creates misunderstandings when a creator doesn't do a thing. It causes people to value a channel that maybe isn't actually trying to do the thing they want. This makes the viewer less happy because they're not getting what they're looking for. And it makes the creator less happy because their viewers want something they don't care about, or don't care about them when they wish they did. Again, if you want to make a platform where you crank out general use videos, there's nothing wrong with that, but you should be aware that the price you're paying is that people do not care about you. Even if they think they do, they're not going to do anything. You know what I mean? Like, they're not going to help. This might be fine. There are a lot of people who get a good result out of this because they get very popular, but they don't want to, like, be a celebrity, for example. And you can be kind of invisible by doing this without, you know, investing more of yourself into it or whatever. It's also theoretically very efficient. You get a lot of video and money, and you can give someone else a job, like an editor, for not much of your life. Like, you essentially just play video games. The problem, again, is that you're very likely to get burnt out on the video games. Like, and you can't just change freely. You're gonna have to play kind of the same type of video game. You don't have the flexibility that you get if you're a creator that moves more in the direction of the individual, where you can explain why you're playing this new thing, and more people are inclined to go just for you. There's simply less of you in these general use videos. It's not about whether it's better or worse for there to be more of you. There just objectively isn't as much of you, the individual, in the video. It is more the game. So if the game changes too much, that's it. That's the only thing people are, you know, going to the video for. Even if they think otherwise, I would argue that people who are fans of these kinds of channels, at the end of the day, are coming there for that kind of game, which is a drawback. Now we have kind of category number 2. We have the, we should name them. The first one is going to be called the mass marketer. This is usually games that are popular too. It can't be a game that isn't well known. The second one is what I'm going to call the amateur. This is probably most people on most platforms like this. They are people who it happens to. They made a video that went viral. They just make videos or stream for fun, and it got relatively popular for whatever reason. This might be some quirk, like they have a unique voice or appearance. They have some editing gimmick or very, very good branding. They do a critical mass of things at the right time and kind of do the mass marketing thing, but they are an individual. These are the people least likely to think of themselves as having a strategy, because they don't really, but that is itself a strategy. They are a person on YouTube. And a lot of audiences are quite favorable to people that are just people. They seem personable, they're accessible, they feel relatable. They don't do things for what feels like a manipulative reason, although they often do, but it feels like they're not out to get you. They're not a business person, even though they're running a business. When they have a sponsor that isn't very nice, you forgive them because they don't seem like they did that maliciously. They did often do it carelessly, and personally, I care about that, but a lot of audiences don't care about that, which is neither here nor there. I just disagree. This puts you in a situation as a creator where people do kind of care about you as a person, and you can kind of be flexible, and they will probably back your Patreon and your Kickstarter or something, but like not that much. Not that much. They'll do it in a way that will be sustainable, but you will need to run sponsorships and ads to make most of your money. And if you do something that is statistically unpopular on YouTube's algorithm, you won't do well, because enough of your success comes from people watching people with the same non-strategy that you can't continue unless you have that general circulatory energy. You need that blood pumping through the veins of new viewers, a lot of new viewers. You're not going to maintain regulars for a super long time most of the time. things will change. This kind of person probably will change what kind of game they're playing if they get burnt out, and they will lose a lot of viewers, which they'll probably recover, provided that the game is accessible enough. This is fine. It happens all the time. You can find lots of channels like this. Many of these channels hover in the range of 100,000 subscribers on YouTube for a long time. This is also like most people on Twitch that are successful on Twitch. Twitch is simply a platform that is conducive to this. Like, individual quirks are a little bit more visible on Twitch, and not having a strategy is also more forgiving on Twitch because people don't perceive strategies as much, and there aren't as many different mechanisms on Twitch to turn. That is, like, being successful on Twitch doesn't take as many forms. Finally, we get to me, what I'm doing. And there are other people doing this thing, certainly. What I'm doing is the opposite of the mass market person, and kind of the opposite of the amateur person. What I'm going to call me doing is the individualist. I'm trying to maximize individuals, hence the name. My goal is to make the money I need for a living through the least possible people that are the most possible in line with my own, not values, desires. In other words, I want the smallest number of people to care the largest relative amount about the things I care about, because it causes me to be sustained by people who have the exact same wants that I do. I then have immeasurable job security if I can get it to work. It is essentially impossible. It's preposterous to think that I wouldn't continue to make about the amount of money I would unless society as a whole collapses. And indeed, when I finally started making a little less money, it actually was because of COVID-19. But again, what are you going to do? Again, the point I'm trying to make is that if you do make less money, you have bigger problems to worry about, like you're going to die to a viral pandemic. Thankfully, we mostly didn't. Glad to be vaccinated. Hope you're enjoying that too. You get what I'm trying to say, though. It means that growth is generally largely permanent because you'll retain viewers for the largest amount of time. You will hopefully eventually find people for whom their core need is the thing that you're providing. Not that you are their core need, but that you're fulfilling something that isn't as changeable about them. It's something that they're going to enduringly want. Now, young people, this is just not possible, because even if I fit your lifestyle and I provide something you enduringly want, you will eventually, that will just change because you'll be going through lifestyle changes, like being in college, being in grad school, and having an apartment, and a different kind of family situation or romantic situation or whatever. But when you can attract an adult that has a relatively stable life situation and a relatively stable income, using this approach, you have the potential to retain them for a long time because you and they are pretty aligned. It makes sense. The relationship just makes sense. People aren't largely supporting you out of the goodness of their heart primarily. They're doing it because it makes sense to, you know. Now, some of you are supporting me out of the goodness of your hearts, and I really appreciate that. Please don't get me wrong. The other good thing about this is that you can be on the same page with people. And when people support me out of the goodness of their heart, they stop doing it when they don't have the money. And if you haven't stopped doing it and you don't have the money, stop it. You having a sustainable lifestyle is what's sustainable for me too. So overall, it is an advantageous position to be in if you can get there because it's largely permanent. Nothing short of the collapse of the world at large will make your job be in jeopardy. The growth is just very slow, and you need to be able to explain what this platform you have is, why what you're doing is the way it is. There are a lot of YouTube channels that do this. They do the thing I'm describing. A lot of Twitch channels that do the thing I'm describing, but it just doesn't work. And the reason it doesn't work, I think, is because two things. They're not sure how to balance it so that it will be sustainable. In other words, they don't know where to sacrifice a little bit of their principle in a way that is reasonable and not harmful or, you know, betraying themselves to be successful enough. Or two, they don't know how to explain what it is that they're trying to do. It's too specific in a way that doesn't make sense to enough people. It might just be too specific too. They might want something that not enough humans want, for example. or the thing they want is so individualistic that it takes an unsustainable amount of resources or time, or both. I am lucky to be a person who picked a topic that a lot of people like. I don't really think it's luck, but I'm lucky that those people found me, because early in my career, I didn't do a good job expressing what I was looking for, just like a lot of people who've tried to do this thing this way. I just made videos about Warframe, and what I liked about Warframe was that it had these build systems. Fortunately for me, there were enough people who watched those videos that did, whether they knew it or not, actually like that same thing as well. And then eventually, I did the thing that causes you to succeed with this strategy, which is realized that I needed to explain that more clearly, and then pivoted rather significantly toward focusing on that. And now I'm rather confident, even though we don't know yet, that it will work going forward. This is extremely beneficial for your mental health. This allows you to do literally whatever you want and have it be genuinely valuable to people, because what you want is the thing you told people is valuable to you, and they support you because it's valuable to them, ideally. And if they don't, you say things like this, and one person realizes they actually don't want that. And if you lose that person, that's actually kind of good. I thank that person for their support if they're here. No one specific. I'm just saying, like, there might be like a tiny amount of people that are supporting you that don't yet know that your interests aren't aligned, but that's okay. That it's perfectly fine to clarify to those people. You will drive away audience members you could have kept if you were willing to cater to their interests. But the whole advantage of this is that you don't need to cater to market trends or sponsorships or anything besides yourself, your community, but your community's values will be your values, because you've made it so there isn't anything good about you except those things. There isn't any other appeal. There's nothing good about the videos you're making or the stream you're doing except the things you want. So seemingly coincidentally, like magic, I simply am not asked to do things that are a problem for me a meaningful amount of the time. That's great. And because of that, the few times I am, I can generally be flexible or like talk to the person about it or just do it. I'm perfectly up for, I have to do lots of things just to maintain my business that I don't like doing. But the viewer, you, don't usually want me to do something that I don't want to do, because I made my community a place that isn't enjoyable unless you want the same things I do. And the reason to talk about this parlay question, the reason to add this gigantic addendum at the end that was almost longer than the whole parlay question, is that this business strategy rests on the idea that it can be explained what I want and that I actually deliver that thing. The Achilles heel of this strategy is if what you want, let's say, oh, it could be something else, like artistic betterment. This is a good example of something that often fails. Sometimes somebody will do this kind of thing and their goal is like they want to become a better artist or whatever. The viewer can't have that experience with you. You see the problem? I'm about exploring build options. We can have nearly the same experience of doing that. And the closer our experiences get, the more likely it is that our values are aligned, and the more likely it is that my thing will be sustainable. The reason that build options are such a good platform for this strategy is because we can make our experience be synchronous. We can have almost the same experience. We can play together and do a similar thing, etc. And the reason it's so important to do this discussion thing right is that the more asymmetrical our communication is, the less we're having a similar experience and the less our views are coming into light. If your experience of discussing with me on my stream isn't similar enough to my experience of discussing with you, we might actually be people who don't want the same thing. And if that happens with a lot of people, this business strategy fails. I think at the moment, I'm just close enough to providing like something similar enough of the time that it is working, but it is a tenuous balance that must be worked to be maintained. And I think that this parlay is important because it helps maintain that. We want our discussions to be on equal terms because we're both nice people that want to discuss. but also because it's the only way to make this strategy work. I simply won't be able to make a living. I will fail and have to get another job if it can't be an equal enough experience. Because if it isn't, I'm not going to attract the right kind of people. And as that happens less and less, the people who do want the same thing as me won't be happy because they won't be getting exactly what they're looking for, which is the entire point of me as a creator. I also won't be happy, but I won't be able to do anything about it. And I will slowly drift into the territory where I'm competing with people who have sponsors, who play things that are only discoverable, and so they get more views. And I am going to lose that competition. It's not going to work. I'm going to have to do the same thing, which I don't want to do, or I'm not going to get any new people in my audience. So there it is. I hope all of that made sense. That was long. I didn't think that I should have recorded this part as something separate because it ended up being really long. Mr. Food, thank you for the question. I thought it was really thoughtful and useful and productive, and I hope that everybody else thought so too. I hope that you found it worthwhile for me to kind of explain what I see as the different approaches to platforms like YouTube and Twitch, and that it makes sense why mine has things that make it tick that are important. That big point about maintaining the social contract and not attracting people who don't want the same thing, and like why that's bad. I hope that makes sense because I think it is really important. I've seen benefits from it, so I'm basically positive it's really important, but who knows? So yeah, I think that's all I have to say. And by that's all I have to say, I mean, wow. Like when I use the expression, my 2 cents about something, no, like I don't get to use that expression. We've been joking about this on the stream for a long time, but a person like me who makes videos like this, the expression, my 2 cents, it needs to be at least my $9 on the topic, right?